Welcome to the Moffitt Method Podcast, where longtime strength and conditioning coach Tommy Moffitt explores everything from the art of coaching, improving performance, sports nutrition, and mental training. Now, welcome your host, Coach Tommy Moffitt.
Welcome to the Moffitt Method Podcast, and I am your host, Tommy Moffitt. If you're listening for the first time, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. We have a special guest today, and Coach Paul Jackson is someone that I met in 2006 and a very dear friend of mine and a super smart and intelligent strength coach. And I think you're all going to enjoy the podcast today. So Coach Jackson is in his second season at Utah State and is the head strength and conditioning coach for the football team. In his first season at Utah State, Coach helped the Aggies to their very best season in school history as they tied the school record with 11 wins and went 11-3, and then won their first Mountain West championship and posted a 24-13 win against Oregon State in the Jimmy Kimmel Louisiana LA Bowl, and finished the season ranked 24th in the national polls. Prior to joining Utah State, Jackson spent the 2020 season as the head strength and conditioning coach at South Carolina for head football coach Will Muschamp. Prior to South Carolina, Coach Jackson spent 8 years as the head strength and conditioning coach for football at Ole Miss, working for head coaches Hugh Freeze and Matt Luke. During his tenure in Oxford, the Rebels achieved 4 bowl game appearances, including back-to-back New Year's Six Bowls in 2014 and 2015. Jackson arrived in Oxford after spending 2011 at Southern Miss, where he oversaw strength and conditioning for the entire University of Southern Mississippi athletic department with direct responsibility over football. In 2011, the football team posted a school record 12-2 season and captured the Conference USA Championship. Coach arrived in Hattiesburg, Mississippi after serving 2010 as the director of athletic conditioning for football at Miami of Ohio. In his lone season, he helped the Red Hawks to a 2010 MAC championship and a victory in the 2011 GoDaddy Bowl, becoming the first team in NC2A history to go from double-digit losses to double-digit wins in 1 year. That's huge. From 2007, this is where it gets good right here, folks. From 2007 to 2010, Coach Jackson served as an assistant strength coach at LSU, working directly with the Tigers football and volleyball teams. During his time in Baton Rouge, the football team won an SEC championship and the BCS National Championship, as well as 3 consecutive SEC Western Division and 1 SEC Volleyball Championship. In fact, after he left, every volleyball strength coach was compared to him. So that was always tough shoes to fill. Yeah. A native of White Plains, New York, Jackson got his start in the business as a professional intern for strength coach of the New York Giants. Coach Jerry Palmieri is actually the coach that recommended Coach Jackson to me. He also spent time as a performance enhancement specialist at the Parisi Speed School in Garwood, New Jersey. He is a certified strength and conditioning specialist through the National Strength and Conditioning Association. All right. During college at Montclair State University in New Jersey, Coach Jackson lettered in football, spending time at both linebacker and fullback. He earned his bachelor's degree in physical education in 2006 and later received his master's in kinesiology from LSU. He is married to the former Christina Hull, who played softball at Georgia Tech and has been a Winter Olympic hopeful in the skeleton. Paul and Christina met when they were both on the strength and conditioning staff at LSU. Wow, what a resume. Ooh. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the podcast, Coach Paul Jackson. Let's give him a hand right there, my man.
Coach, appreciate you having me on. I want to hear somebody read your bio.
Yeah, well, hey, I don't know about But man, Paul, that was awesome, man. And again, thank you for coming on here. I really appreciate it a lot. And I think, when I was doing this, this script for the show today, I was thinking about how you and I met. And so I wanted to tell this story real quick. So a very dear friend of mine and Paul's boss at the New York Giants is Coach Jerry Palmieri, one of the finest, most sincere and knowledgeable strength coaches that you'll ever come across. The man had a wonderful, both collegiate and professional career, and he had worked for my first collegiate boss, Coach John Stuckey. So we had Coach Palmieri and I had a lot in common. So one day the phone rings and I answer it, and it's Coach Palmieri. And he recommends Paul. And, the things that he said, well, first of all, when Coach Palmieri calls, you listen. And he had some tremendous things to say about your work ethic, your attitude, how bright you were. And so we invited Paul down, and he didn't embellish that recommendation at all. Everything that he said came true, and you were just a phenomenal coach for us, and honestly changed a lot about what we did in our program, and especially in our running program. We were primarily a linear sprint team with programmed agilities, cones and bags and ropes and that type of stuff. And Paul switched that all up and just did a phenomenal job. So I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, today's going to be a great show. So Paul, I'm going to start off with our first question, if that's okay with you.
Let's go.
All right. So everyone's journey in this business and motivation is different. But what was it about strength and conditioning that motivated you to spend the rest of your life working with elite athletes?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I didn't necessarily have this path planned out for me as I was going through college, and being a Division III athlete, I didn't see it at this highest level. I didn't know you could be a professional strength coach and actually make a good living of it and build an entire career from it. So it wasn't something I had planned, but I always loved the weight room. I love training. Undersized guy, typical story, average athlete, but loves to train, try to max out everything you can do in that area. So I knew I wanted to be in the weight room. I like being around athletes. I didn't know if I was going to be a personal trainer in a gym, if I was going to, what it was going to be. But key thing for me in this profession and just in life in general, I did not always live up to my best in my earlier years. So athletically, socially, academically, I didn't max my stuff out. And during my time in college, I had a professor named Rob Gilbert, and he introduced me to a concept of glad I did versus wish I did. He said, every single thing you do is going in one of those piles. And if you end up with too many wish I did, you're going to be a unhappy old man. So you got to make sure that as you're going through it, you're compiling these glad I dids. So strength conditioning is an area where we're trying to help these young guys maximize their potential and the opportunity that they have in college. So everything we're doing is about that, recognizing the opportunities that they have and how can we help you do it. And it's not just getting bigger, faster, and stronger, which is it's what we study. It's what we train to do. We love doing it. But it is watching them grow and helping them make decisions and what are the habits that you're going to develop now that carry you through life and add to that glad I did pile. So that definitely motivates me. I'm glad that I'm able to use the tool of strength conditioning to do that because I do love the weight room and being around the team atmosphere and having games to play on Saturdays. All that's great. But, again, that pursuit of maximizing potential and opportunities is the number one thing for me.
Oh, wow. That's unbelievable. Now, I think I've heard you talk about glad I did, wish I did before. That if I had that knowledge bomb sound on my soundboard here, I would have just dropped it because that's really something good that you can talk to kids about, and, because you're always looking for something for those guys to hold on to. And that's really good as far as the decision-making process goes. So who were some of your early, role models or mentors in this business? Because I know you've had a lot and you've had a lot of experiences.
Yeah, well, I tell every young coach to choose your internships, choose your first jobs wisely because you were going to be influenced by those guys, whether you want to or not. So I was blessed. You mentioned Coach Palmieri already. to watch the preparation, the amount of time and effort he put into planning ahead of time before guys ever showed up, before the weight room needed to be set up, learning that, and then kind of exactly what you said, how he called you, recommended me, the way he supported and followed up and checked on people. A man of his stature in his profession does not need to be calling a 23-year-old former intern and checking on him, but he did. So seeing that was a great example for me, and I'm not near as good at that as he is, but it is something I do value, and I think it's important, and I respect that from him. But he was a tremendous role model for me. I went to Parisi Speed School from there and got to learn a bunch of the speed and agility foundational things that then we could expand on as we get outside that box. But there was a guy there, Steve Leo, who really poured into me and helped me come up with ideas and all right, how can I be creative within the framework of their system? And then I got to LSU, and I mean, my first real paid boss is Tommy Moffitt. I'm joining that tree and that family, and it doesn't get any better than that. So between those three guys, I mean, I don't think it could have been much better. The combination of you and Coach Palmieri is kind of a cheat code. I got a huge head start on life in this profession.
Appreciate that. And you did far more for me than I would ever do for you. So, but I appreciate it tremendously. It's always humbling to have someone say that. Was there a defining moment when you were young that may have influenced you to become a coach, or was that other than the professors, or was there a thing that?
So I didn't grow up with a lot of money, and I didn't even know, again, you could make a lot of money doing this. So I was just trying to figure out how can I afford an apartment outside of my parents' house. I just wanted to be able to do that. And I was doing that. I was working as a personal trainer in a gym, making enough money where I didn't have to live at home. So I was fairly content. And I got a call from Coach Palmieri with the Giants. The New York Giants facility is very close to Montclair State, and Palmieri is an alumni of Montclair State. I think he had a guy back out last minute for that paid internship. He called the school, who then recommended me. I was 50-50. I didn't really want to do it. And my father told me exactly how stupid I would be if I did not take that job. So thank God my father was adamant that I take it. Yeah. I took it, and that kind of started everything. So that was definitely the moment that started the journey. Since I've been on the journey, though, there's been a bunch of lessons that have impacted the way I coach and what's going on. Yeah. Watching you, I tell everybody, you are the definition of a thermostat. Of any strength coach who's ever done it, I don't think anybody can control the room and make it be the way you want it to be. And that is extremely impressive to see. And you have to take ownership of everything that's happening in that weight room. So the head football coach is responsible for the entire program. Watching you and being around you and the everything you uphold, the head strength coach is responsible for every single thing that happens in that weight room. So very rarely am I going to come home and say, hey, the kids had a great day today, but I was a terrible coach, or vice versa. If the kids had a good day, it's probably because you had a good day coaching. So you can't come home and complain and blame them for not having a day. You need to look at yourself and say, I probably didn't coach my ass off today. So I was probably average coach today. Somebody could have corrected that clean. Somebody would have inspired that kid to hustle in here and get on time. Somebody could have done it, and today it was or it wasn't me. So that is a major one that I got from you, and it's impacted everything about the way I coach.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so you've coached a long time, and you've had a lot of experiences at every level of sport. Are there some things that you feel every football player should do in our business, regardless of their experience or level of play?
I think, when it comes down to it, obviously you have to prepare your body for the rigors of football. So you have to train all year round. I think once your season ends and you heal up from whatever injuries you had and you recover, the quicker you can get back into some form of training, be it a high school kid playing other sports or training, or be it a professional athlete. I don't think going through periods of extreme variance in activities is good. So you need to get back to training. So I do think year-round training is valuable for everybody. That may look different for a middle school kid versus a pro. I do think for everybody, especially beyond, say, puberty, managing your body composition is going to be huge for any of these guys, collegiate athletes and up on to professionals, especially as you aging, you get in your mid, late 20s, 30s. That's a huge part of you being able to perform is going to be making sure that your body comp is under control, maintaining that muscle mass, low body fat as possible. I think you have to do that. I think everybody has to sprint, not necessarily a ton of yardage conditioning. I think everybody has to run fast. Big guys, little guys, there's no other CNS stimulant like sprinting. So I think that there has to be some form of sprinting, short sprints, longer, whatever it is. There's a lot of bandwidth within that prescription, but I think you got to sprint. And I believe that obviously the strength training has to be a part of it. With all these things, and specifically with strength training, it's weird. There's a kind of a curve. Early on, you probably need to do very, very basic, simple things. You don't have to get complicated with it. As you master them, you start to introduce maybe some more complicated lifts, stuff like that. And then as you get older again, you've achieved physical maturity, you've achieved high levels in sport. So now the only things that's going to help you continue to get better at your sport are going to be your sport, very specific stuff, and then maintaining very general stuff. So then you can go back to very, very basic lifting. But all of them across that spectrum of complexity, you want to get a basic squat pattern, a basic hinge pattern, a press, a row, and some form of explosive movement. You know, with us, that's going to be a lot of the Olympic type movements and pulls and things like that. But it could be med ball throws, box jump. There's got to be some total body coordinative, explosive movement occurring while you're reinforcing all the basic human movements.
You know, that reminds me of when I first started at LSU. You know, I came there in the wintertime, and as the NFL players started rolling in, you know, from all the different teams, there was a guy, his name was Gabe Northern, and Gabe, I think, was playing for the Minnesota Vikings or something at the time. And so he came in and, you know, started messing around a little bit with the weights. And so I started talking to him about, you know, how much he trained. And he goes, you know, he said, when I first got to the NFL, our strength coach told us not to overwork ourselves, not to do this, not to do that. You want to stay on these machines over here. And he said, I kind of took that too literal, and I just basically laid off from lifting. And he said, when I lost my college pump, my NFL career started plummeting. And he said, it's taken me a long time to get back to where I was when I left college. And he said, it's been tough, but he goes, looking back, that shortened my career and it affected me on Sunday. And so that's, you know, you touched on that a little bit right there, that, you know, when you start that roller coaster of getting in shape, getting out of shape, getting in shape, getting out of shape, it's tough to show consistent long-term adaptation.
It's tough. I used Kyle Williams. Actually, I know he's one of the early guys you coached at LSU. One of our players found some motivational clip that Kyle gave a speech to his team. It was badass. I mean, it was hardcore stuff. And they don't know who he is or anything. They just found this clip of a former player, and they were sending it around the team. And I saw it. I said, no, that's Kyle Williams. He was in the NFL, and he was coming back to Baton Rouge, and he was doing every single workout that those college kids did. He's a millionaire. He didn't have to do any of this. And he's choosing to come out. He's up front on the runs. He's lifting. I think he couldn't catch the ball anymore, but he was doing pulls. He was squatting. He was doing everything. I said, that's the type of person that y'all are watching on that video. It's not just talk. Yeah.
He trained for us probably 6 or 7 years of his NFL career until he, you know, built a home in Ruston, because he had a house here in Baton Rouge, and then he built a big home up there in Ruston. So, yeah, you're right. So can you discuss, because you got into it some just then, but could you discuss, and I know this is going to be good, your holistic big picture program design model that you use for football?
Okay. So again, as the head strength coach, or as you get more experience, you do start to just think of the entire big picture. How does all this stuff work together? How does practice and rehab and strength conditioning program all fit in? So to me, there's really 4 major things that are going to be stressors all year round. Again, if you have somebody who's going through rehab or an injury, that adds another one. But you got to look at, number one, the sport. These kids are, especially in college and definitely in the pros, they are there because of that sport. They're there to play football in our case. That's number one. 2 is going to be speed and agility. So this is kind of my second barrel or pillar or whatever else. You got the fatigue resistance part, which is going to be your conditioning, all those, the different energy systems development there. And then you have your strength and power. So where on that spectrum are we falling? So sport, speed and agility is number 2, fatigue resistance 3, strength and power is number 4. All 4 of those things, in my opinion, have to be trained all year round. You just have to control the volume of each of them to focus on whichever one is your priority at that time. Some people will have a phase where it's heavily weight room, very, very minimal on the field. I think it's a mistake to have nothing on the field at any time, but some people will dial it way up in the weight room and way down on the field. For me, I keep the fatigue resistance sort of conditioning part fairly stable all year round. Famous quote, if you stay ready, you never have to get ready. So we're going to stay in condition all year. We're going to keep our body fats low. This may hinder us at some times in the weight room where we could have peaked a little bit more if we weren't running as much. But I'm a big believer that if you let guys stop running, and then when you start running, it becomes such a big deal that then that's all you can do. So yeah. I don't ever want that to happen. So we keep that fairly stable. The other 3 areas, your strength and power, how much the sport's involved, and the speed, you can have a fair amount of influence in how much of it we're doing. So, for instance, early in the offseason, sport-wise, might just be the quarterbacks and receivers. They might not be running routes. They might just be throwing and catching. The O-lineman may just be going out there and walking through some things. Very minimal exposure to sport, which now gives me an opportunity. Okay, this is where we can fit in more weight room stuff. So if you have your total volume, say it's 400. If you had 100 in each of those categories, if one goes up by 20, the other that gives you 20 more that you have to take down from the other 3, if that makes sense. You want your total of 400, and we have to play with those. So as we're working on all the abilities that I think you have to train, that's the integration of them, is them working together. Then there's the progression of them. All right. So the complexity of your workouts, the density of your workouts, the intensity of them, those things all get to, within each category, also increase throughout the year. If we get into summer, that's when you're doing single leg plyos and you're doing a lot more complex things. You're doing longer true sprint sessions, things that are more complex, more intense, and the workouts become more dense as you're going through each of those categories. Same thing with football. They start off, like I mentioned, they might just be throwing and catching. Then it becomes one-on-ones. Then it becomes 7-on-7. Then they out there running through full 11-on-11s by the time we get through season. Not with the coaches out there, but the players are running those things. So again, closer to what they're actually going to have to do, more intense, more complex, more dense, and we have to manage that. That's where I think later on in your careers, you do start to see big pictures, managing that whole thing and how they relate to each other, as opposed to early on where it's like, I'm the speed guy. I can create the best acceleration technique out here. I still think I can do that very well. But again, big picture is probably more important than me getting in there and really working the mechanics of the small details. Assistants can do that. I think that the head guy, you have to keep the big picture in mind.
Great job of explaining that. So on your fatigue resistance, you said that you train that year round. Now within that, do you adjust for different energy systems at certain times of the year, or is it mixed throughout the week? And how do you emphasize that aspect?
So it is mixed. Again, that one progresses mostly in the density category. So I talked about intensity, complexity, and density. So our rest periods is what will be manipulated the most throughout those. Now, we do have different drills that we'll run, but typically for us, Tuesday is going to be a more extensive tempo type day, longer runs, lower intensities, not something that's terribly difficult to recover from. But what a lot of the guys think is the harder day. It may be gassers, it may be whatever it is. Those are your longer, if you look at it in a yards per second standpoint, not as fast conditioning type day. And then Fridays for us is our intensive tempo. So that tends to be a shorter distance of run at a higher yards per second run. And we'll do it that way. On our extensive tempo days, it's strictly rest periods. So we may start, say we're running gases. I'll use gases as an example. We may start off with 1 minute rest and break it all the way down to where at the end of the day, we're still running 1,600 yards, but it ends up being 45 seconds rest between reps as opposed to a minute. Friday, our go-to is repeat 50s. So we end up working up to 1,000 yards because, again, it's more intensive. They're running faster. You can't do as much volume on that day. Now, how do we get to running 2050s for our skill guys in a short period of time? For us, we start off running 4 sets of 5, 30 seconds between reps, but then a break after every 5 reps. And then we'll progress that to 2 by 10. As we master that, we start running 20 straight. So now we're running 20 straight high-speed 50s with very minimal rest, and we're able to get that. So, again, the density of the workouts there, the quality of the work is still done because the time on the 50 is not changing as it's getting harder. So that's the quality we're looking for, the intensity to the yards per second. But we're going to be able to now get this 1,000 yards in a much shorter time with less overall rest than we did early in the year. So we kind of progress that way. We'll also, if we're coming off of a break, that's when we'll do boxes. I love boxes. I put the GPSs on guys at Ole Miss and South Carolina when we had them, and they actually achieved more high-speed yardage doing boxes than almost any other condition that we're doing. So there's definitely some work being done on those. So that's in the repertoire. We'll do some just repeat 10s with a walk. So there's not necessarily a clock on them, but it may be a 10-yard burst, walk 10, turn around, right back into it. It's kind of self-paced, untimed drills where guys can work themselves into shape before we get down to the main ones that I talked about already.
Yeah. So on the boxes, that was one thing that for us, that was an easy day. And you're spread out. They're not all bunched up. There was never any stress leading into those type of workouts, like how many reps we're going to do. If I said we have 5 boxes or 8 boxes, they'd say, okay, let's go.
Right.
But then when you start breaking it down, those guys are working harder in that than they did all the other stuff. And that there was less coaching them up during the process. So that's just, sometimes we make things out as athletes and as coaches, as humans, we make things out to be a lot harder than what they really are. And then you take something that's just as difficult and you make it an easy day. And that was the neat thing about boxes. And our guys, I don't know about y'all, but our guys, if there was a workout where I'd said, I want you to go outside and do some running. Here are your options. Do this, 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 and this. They're going to go do boxes every time almost.
Yep. And it was the same way. I looked at it as an easier day until we were tracking it, and I was blown away. And then I was having this thought. I said, okay, if this is getting what I want, it's low stress to coach. The kids don't get all freaked out about it, but we're getting the work done. Why are we not doing this? And then you get into the whole, in college especially, sometimes you got to put on a show. Like sometimes the cadence and the ceremony of we're getting down and it's 10-second call or whatever it is, or it doesn't look hard enough for the coaches, but it just makes you think about all that stuff. And those things are part of it, the psychology of what we've been through and being able to sell that. But just from a training standpoint, it's like, man, we really could just go run boxes.
Put a guy on the start, put a guy on the finish, and let's roll. Same here, man. Same here. So let me ask you this: when you're doing the running, you talked about the distances for the skill guys. Do you break that down by skill, mid skill, and big skill? Do you have different distances for your guys when they're running?
Yeah, so we have different distances because I like to. We run as a team on those days, and I don't want to. I tried to figure out how to not have them start in different waves. So everybody's starting and stop. Everybody's finish line is the same. Everybody's starting point is different. So on the days we're running the 50s, it's really 40s, 45s, and 50s. Everybody's time is 6 seconds. So we're doing that, and the rest and the work is the same. It's just that the distance. And then if you look at that per rep, that's okay. I ran 10 more yards than you, but over 20 reps, that's significant. If we end up running 25 or 26 or 30 that day because of repeats, the difference in yardages is significant. And when you do it from gases, it's even more, where a rep is 200 yards. And then for the bigs, they're running far less than that. If they're starting, say, 10 yards off the sideline, that's every time they're going. It's 40 yards different every rep. So trying to take something off those guys, giving them something that they can achieve and still have everybody starting and stopping at the same time.
Yeah, and I heard you're talking about the distance per second, and so distance per minute. So you're tracking them every time y'all go outside. You're tracking them.
Well, when we had the technology, we were tracking the distance per minute, more as far as the intensity of the day. But in yards per second, you could just look at it. Okay, if we go, it's a 6-second 50. You divide 50 by 6, that lets you know the yards per second, where if it was 7, this is what it is. And I can do the same thing for the big guys. All right, so 40 yards divided by 6 seconds is X yards per second. So we can manage that, and I can look at how much faster that is than if we were to run just tempo hundreds, or if we were to run those gases, what pace are they running those at? And it just lets you compare, okay, this is significantly faster than that. When you're looking at totally different exercise, sometimes it's hard to know which one they're running fast. Yeah, that's faster, but it's shorter. When you're looking at it in yards per second standpoint, it actually knows, no, they were running whatever the distance was faster than they were the other exercise.
Right. So what about with the same positions in the weight room? Is everybody doing the same thing, or are the skill and mid-skill guys doing something different than the big guys?
Yeah, so our young guys do some different stuff before they get into the main program. There is an intro or developmental program. The guys may be in for 8 weeks. They may be in it for 6 months. It kind of depends on their progression and what they've been trained with ahead of time. We do start out football player number one. All right, what's the things that every football player needs to do? If we're back squatting, an O-lineman squats the same way a running back squats. It's not like a running back squat versus an O-lineman squat, just in general sense.
Yeah.
Then we'll go position-wise. All right, quarterbacks end up with certain imbalances because they throw. You know, there's just certain things that happen that we may either take out or add something into all their programs. So, again, sticking with quarterbacks, I don't let quarterbacks catch just because they can't do their job if they happen to sprain their wrist. Everybody else, if something happens, they can. So just to alleviate any of that, that's just one thing. Using more dumbbells instead of barbells for the quarterbacks, that's something specific to those guys. But really, most of the things we change up program to program are going to be individual needs. So it's either due to injury history or just something that doesn't work for this player, because all our players have sheets the same way we did there. Yeah. They have assigned loads on there, and I make adjustments to every single individual sheet. So if there's a player that we may have a player that doesn't squat, he only trap bar deadlifts. That's on his sheet. So that's not because he's an O-lineman. That's because he's been, you know what I mean? So we make those adjustments more based on the individual needs than any specific positional stuff. Now, obviously, our big guys, if I have a receiver who's working really hard but doesn't necessarily want to continue to drive his squat past 400 pounds, I'm probably more lenient on that. Big guys, we have to go with their certain strength standards we have to get to. So I'm going to be adding, 10, 20 pounds on their loads more frequently than I am maybe a skill guy who doesn't love the weight room, but I'm getting what I want out of them. Right. So the importance of it is there. Those bigger guys have more warm-up sets to get to those loads. It's just some of that same way they get a little less volume on the field, we make sure they get a little more volume in the weight room.
Yeah. All right. What about in the speed and agility, the work that you do there? Is it similar, Bob? Is it similar to what you're doing in the weight room?
Yeah, I do think there's some differences. The big guys, you have to be aware that they are big people. I think that they probably, especially if you had skill guys who did other sports and ran track, to me, I think the big guys probably get more out of our speed work than anything, because you see a lot of those guys, they've never done anything but be an O-lineman. They never played another sport. They never ran. So them just going through our warm-ups, you can see how much better they are in 2 years, lighter on their feet, twitchier, more coordinated. You can just see all those things from the speed workout. So even if it doesn't matter if I run a 5.4 or a 5.2, I mean, it does matter, but it doesn't really matter, especially in the kid's mind. He might be like, why am I doing this? I move people all day round. I don't have to run anywhere. But for their overall athleticism, I think they get a lot out of it. Now, that being said, they don't ever have to run when we're doing wickets, or if we're running in and outs, or we're running things that where you're upright for longer. I don't stress those big guys with those type of drills. With the plyos, I do very, very, very minimal, if any, single leg plyos for the big guys. We're going to keep them on 2 feet. They're always going to have less contact than the skill guys. They'll do more loaded things. If we're doing some resisted sprinting, our big guys push things while our skill guys may toe lighter things. Just more stuff like that. Definitely bilateral, simpler jumps is going to be something we consider for the big guys, but they don't do everything on those days that our skill guys do. You get a DB who's a triple jumper in high school, you can get freaky. We can start doing some crazy things with him. I don't even if the big guy looks like he can, I don't ask them to do those types of things. What
about your outside linebackers, your defensive ends, some of the more athletic big guys? Will you let them, do a little bit of extra if they want to?
I do. Now it gets to sometimes it becomes a distraction because if I let you do it, hopefully you have competitive guys in that room and then other guys start coming over there and wanting to do it. But I do, if there's a guy who I feel can handle it, his body comp's good, even if it's at a lower volume than what the smaller guys are doing, I will let them, because especially if you were at LSU or, South Carolina.
Some of those freak shows,
Those guys are aliens now, so you don't want to hold them back. And at the same time, they're revving higher, so you got to be more careful with them. They can redline this thing where I can't. What am I going to do over here? I can't push it but so hard. That dude can literally redline it and explode, So I will let those bigger guys do it. More so when I say bigs who are off limits are going to be O-linemen and D-tackles. Guys that are approaching 300 pounds or over 300 pounds, they're not going to be in it. I don't care how athletic they are. Those guys that are 250, 260, it's totally determined by my assessment of their athleticism and their previous training history.
Have you seen any of the report, or not reports, but research on soccer and some of the other GPS studies that have been done about high speed distances or reps of people obtaining above 90 or 95% in a week's period? Have you seen any of that stuff?
Yeah, I looked at a lot of it now, and a lot of the data, what they're calling high-speed yardage is not what I would call high-speed yardage. They're either basing it, like you just mentioned, on a percentage of the heights that they've achieved, or it's over 16 miles an hour, which for a skill guy, that's not really running. That's a good pace, but that's not a sprint. So you almost have to differentiate between true high-speed run. All right, how often was he over 20 miles an hour, 21 miles an hour?
Yeah.
And the problem with that, for research purposes, is it may not happen very often. You may have a guy who goes 3 games without getting any of those yards. So it's hard for them to publish research on it when they can't really produce enough of it to study. It just doesn't happen very often. But those are the situations where the game gets changed and where I'm special and where people get hurt is at those truly high speed ones if they haven't been exposed to it. But
exactly.
And I think that's part of why soccer and rugby, these other sports that have heavily used the GPS, they've still had trouble with injuries. It's not like they've solved the problem. They're having a ton of problems. And I think part of it is what they're calling high speed yardage is not really high speed yardage.
Yeah. So I had one of our former players who's playing in NFL right now has had some hamstring issues. So he called me and wanted me to put together a strength and conditioning program for his hamstring. So I asked him, how are you practicing each week? And he goes, well, they won't let me do much in practice because they want me to get better and fresh and not hurt my hamstring. And so, so it's my belief, and I think everyone's belief, that you've got to sprint during the week prior to your competition. So my question for you would be, do you have any recommendations for high speed distance? Like, for instance, a skill guy over 20 miles per hour, or just the number of reps above a certain percentage, let's say 95% of what his max velocity, let's say the guy's max velocity is 21.3 or some arbitrary number. But do you have any recommendations if you're planning and programming for your team? How many reps would you prescribe in a week? Or what's the distance that you would think your guys would need to get in order to stay healthy and still show improvements in speed?
I have not been able to come up with a great answer to that as far as yardages or number of reps. It's such a complex issue. What I do,
a lot of variables. Yeah,
a lot of variables. What I do believe, a couple parts. Number one, the game is the number. It's the competition, but it's also the number one training stimulus that they're going to get all year.
Yeah.
So they're going to get the high speed yardage there. They're going to get the intensity there. They're going to get the maximum arousal possible on game day. So the guys that are playing in the game, if they're getting that major stimulus on the game day, I would think you just need to just call it touch it 1 or 2 other days per week, where I don't know how many yards or reps, but I don't want to see that be the only day you ran fast. It may be you ran down on 2 kickoffs on Wednesday's practice and you achieved it. I just like to see at least 1, preferably 2 other days a week where they hit velocities that are in whatever our cutoff range is. If we're saying it needs to be above 90% of their achieved max or above 20 miles per hour, I just want to see them at least get to it to avoid detraining, even more so than injury prevention. If you're just jogging all year, you are going to start getting slower. So I want to make sure they're tapping into it at least once, preferably twice per week. Volume-wise, I'm still trying to exactly figure out where it becomes dangerous versus beneficial. I don't have a good answer on that.
A stimulation. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
No, that's perfect because, that's a puzzle. That's an issue that people talk about all the time, healthy hamstrings. And, so whether you're working in the weight room or not, the hamstring muscle, especially in professional football, track and field, those where guys are sprinting at max speed for extended distances sometimes and times, it's something that's important. So Let me ask you this. So training hamstrings and hamstring strength or health are a hot topic today. And that's what, led me to ask you that question now that we're on the topic of, high speeds and sprinting and all that. How do you plan for hamstrings in the weight room? And in your opinion, are healthy hamstrings due to the amount and type of sprints that you have in your program, the type and amount of conditioning that you have in your program, or the weight room, or is it a more holistic approach to all of that? And I think that's a rhetorical question. I know because you basically touched on that, but what are some things that you do in the weight room for those hamstrings?
Yeah, so definitely, I think it's all of it, and I think it's one of the great mysteries of the body and of sport and of injuries, hamstrings. You'll see guys who had tremendous off season. They did everything exactly right, eating good, and then they get hurt. You see other guys who don't, and they stay healthy. You get guys on the Nordic, you measure it, it's the strongest that they've ever recorded, and then they get hurt. Somebody else doesn't. So it is hard to pinpoint why it happens. We have to do our best guesses, our best analysis, and do everything we can to help it. Obviously, on the field, I think that managing sprint loads, proper progression of volume on that. All right, we're not going to go from running 20 yards to running 300 yards of sprint work. We're going to make sure that we're staying within the 80 to 120% of what's previously been done in training. So be that sprint yardage or conditioning yardage. I think that acute to chronic ratio there is something to look at. But in the weight room, hamstrings are responsible for hip extension and knee flexion. In movement, it's done open chain, it's done closed chain, it's done at velocity. So how many different exercises can I hit? So we are going to hit eccentric, Nordics. We're going to do some of that. That's in the program. We're going to do RDLs, heavy RDLs. Then we'll do a lighter RDL because I'll do a clean from below the knee, which is basically an accelerative RDL. Mm-hmm. Definitely the eccentric part of it is the same as RDL, getting into that position. We'll do those. We'll do single leg versions of them as far as of RDLs. Our skill guys will do some strict leg curls, be it on a stability ball or on a machine. Big guys don't necessarily do those. We'll add in higher volume pull-throughs with a cable for the big guys to still work that posterior musculature, but knee flexion may not be as important for them. So as far as the strength training, that's what we hit. Also making sure we have mobility, control, coordination, because if you're looking at hamstring injury, the easiest thing to measure is strength, right? That's what everybody does. I believe that's why people go to that and say, okay, he's got his strength back, he's cleared, right? It's an easy thing to measure, and it is universally impactful. That's one. Beyond a basic minimum level of safety for strength, I don't think that's what leads to hamstring injuries. I don't think if you can leg curl more weight than somebody else, you're going to necessarily stay healthy. I think it is a fatigue thing. Was he prepared to handle the volume of be it sprint yardage or total yardage? I do think it's a coordination thing. Are his hamstrings firing? Is his technical running an issue, or is he an efficient runner? Is he an inefficient runner? Are those coordination patterns firing? And I think that's the biggest reason of why previous injury is the biggest predictor of future injury, because that coordination gets so thrown off. Your body just figures out how to execute the task, but it may have established it in a whole different firing pattern. So being able to get that back in the rehab process, I think, is big. And then the velocities, the violence of your shank swinging out at the end of swing phase is ridiculous. The impact at initial ground contact is so high. There's nothing else in the world where you're producing that amount of force in that amount of time. So the velocity of these contractions has to happen. And doing things prime time, straight leg bounds, all that stuff adds to it. But all of it together, I think, would help. Managing the lows, and again, just trying to do what we can without overdoing it, because that's something else you could do. You'd be like, oh, his hamstrings tore. Let's do 20 sets of Nordics, and then you fried him. Now you can't do anything for a week. But
right.
It's definitely a mystery, and we try to attack it from all those angles.
So, what's a normal training day look like? There, and I don't want you to go into too deep of elaborating on it, but just like, what's the difference between what a normal off-season day would look like compared to an in-season day?
So off-season, we stick typically to a 4-day-a-week schedule. We run and lift on all 4 of those days. We start every day with the run of the day. So we do that as a team in the morning. We'll typically knock that out before anybody has class. So we get the class schedule, we figure that out, and we go backwards from there. We'll start there, full team warm-up, full run. And the last couple of years with the NCAA changing rules where coaches can be involved now all year in some shape or form, a lot of times that's where we'll be able to get in some either quick position work or something with the coaches as well in the morning after we run. So you don't have to worry about, okay, he warmed up and ran, then he lifted, then he went back out with the coaches. I didn't know he was going back out there, and then they warm up. And so we're able to pair those things and match those stressors together. They'll leave, go eat breakfast, go to class, take a nap, whatever. And then we bring them back after everybody's out of class. So our practice block where they have no classes scheduled for practice is in the afternoon. Here it starts at 1:30. So we start our first group at 1:30. We have 4 groups that roll through every 45 minutes, starting at that 1:30 period based by position. The days are structured, again, trying to consolidate stresses. Monday for us is an acceleration, sometimes a top speed day, and that's going to be an explosive power day for us in the weight room. Tuesdays are conditioning. Tuesday afternoon is going to be a medium strength day. So squat, bench, press, row. Those things are happening on Tuesdays and Fridays. Our Olympic movements, our jumps, our med ball throws are happening on Mondays and Thursdays following those speed sessions. We'll train through that pretty much all off season. There will be some times where we go lower body, upper body instead of strength power. Again, coming off breaks, giving guys some time for adaptation, especially here where we have some smaller guys and we need to spend some more time doing some bodybuilding type of work. But typically our main go-to is explosive days and strength days. In season, we get to lift twice a week for everybody. 3 times a week are encouraged for all our big guys, just even if it's a quick pump. But any young guy who's not playing more than 15 snaps a game, if he's not a starter on 2 special teams, all of our young guys are going to get a 3rd lift in during the week. This is the first place I've been where Sundays are a true off day. So we play a game Saturday. Sunday, the kids are off. Here, it has been a blessing. Monday, they come in, we can get a good lift in. It's awesome to see. They got to sleep. They got to get away. And Monday, we come in and rock and roll. So that's our biggest, heaviest workout is Monday. Wednesday, we get another, again, the whole team will lift in 2 different groups on that day. We split offense, defense. It's by position, standard weights on the bar. We're somewhere in the 40 to 50% range, and that's going to be a strictly dynamic day on that. So it's light, explosive, fast, get in and out, and move on. And then Thursday will be the day where our younger guys will get another. That's an off-season lift. That's a full, real training session for those young guys. We get that done on Thursdays.
Yeah. So when, and I think, were we doing Sunday workouts? We were doing Sunday training when
when I was with you, Sunday was mandatory treatment. And if they lifted, they didn't have to lift Monday. So we ended up, if we won, we had a bunch of guys on Sunday.
Yeah.
But most of the guys did train on Sundays.
Yeah. So, we won a lot. So
yeah, no doubt.
But if we lost, man, it was like a ghost town in there. So I guess it was probably 2014, 2015, the compliance and administration said, look, man, I know that these guys are getting their treatment and stuff like that. And a bunch of them are lifting, but it would, we need to show that we're making an effort for them to have an off day. And I said, well, it's strictly voluntary. They don't have to come. I'm not punishing them if they're not here. And they said, well, it'd be best if we just cut that day out. And I said, okay. So I introduced it to the team before the season started. And we had this big tight end, Dylan Gordon. Dylan said, Coach, we've always lifted on Sunday, and I like lifting on Sunday. And that way I have a day off on Monday, and it's a light practice. So I think I get an extra recovery day in there. And then everybody started chiming in. I said, all right, I'll tell you what we're going to do. All right. So for the first 2 weeks of the end season, I'm going to give you Sunday off. And we're going to train on Monday. That third week, when it rolls around, if any of you guys want to come in on Sunday, I will personally open the weight room up and you can come and work out. There wasn't one cat that showed up on that Sunday. You couldn't have paid them to come in. And
it's different.
And they got a solid day of recovery. And, and I know y'all must travel a lot there.
Yep.
And, we had to travel a lot. Like if you have 2 road games back to back because of the drive, there's not many cities that have SEC schools where you can stay the night. You know how it is. You coached in the SEC for a long time. And if you're staying in Ocala, Florida to play Florida, and then the next week you're staying in Olive Branch, Mississippi before the Ole Miss game, man, that wears on you.
No doubt.
And it might not get you that first week, but that second week is when it gets you. And it'll sneak up on you quick. So yeah, that's important.
Big.
You've talked about, and you've mentioned this, you've talked about how, and it's kind of, your 4-day program is very similar to what we did here for years on our true 4-day program. So on those days, are you doing any snatches? Because I know a lot of people have cut those out. And then are you doing snatch, clean pulls, or any type of clean grip or conventional grip deadlifts?
Yeah, so we are. So trap bar deadlifts is the foundation of our young guy program. We're going to go heavy trap bar deadlifts. We're going to go linear progression. We're going to drive that, try to get as strong as we can on those. Just the back work, the leg work, the hip strength. I think it's a great exercise. And it's one that if a kid knows nothing, you can get that to look fairly good pretty quickly and still be working. So a squat ain't the most complicated thing in the world, but there's a lot of coaching involved. That bar's on his back. So if a kid's not good at it, you do have to slow play it, in my opinion, as far as the load that's on there. Trap bars, we can start rolling while we're teaching you all the technical stuff. We're doing goblet squats. We're doing a barbell complex. But that's the one exercise where we can continue to get strong. So everybody who comes through our program will start on that, and we'll do a heavy dose of trap bar deadlifts. In our traditional program, there's not take this back. During intercessions, small breaks, there's still a deadlift component in there for our older guys. But main off-season training blocks, we do a bunch of pulls. We'll do pulls from actually the high hang, where we'll do I call them a power pull, but it's basically a high pull with a rebend under there. So it's just not catching the bar. So we'll do power pulls. We will do clean pulls from below the knee and from the floor. For everybody, that's in the program every week, all off season. We still do clean pulls and those power pulls on our lighter day, dynamic day, a more explosive, lighter type of pull. When we're doing our traditional clean pulls, we're emphasizing leg drive. I call them tall clean pulls now, so they know this is the one where I just try to get tall as possible. The power pulls are the ones where I'm just trying to move the bar real quick and get back in position. Still don't shift the feet. It's still about extending, but on that one, it's rebended. As far as traditional snatches, I have stopped barbell snatching. It's one of my favorite exercises. We started to get a lot of freshmen in who were extremely uncomfortable and weak overhead. So if I can't I mentioned it earlier when we first started talking about this room is my responsibility. I know what a snatch should look like. If the room is not looking like what I know a snatch should look like, there's something going on. We're either not coaching it well. Whatever the reason is, this doesn't look how I think it should look. So it started to be that way. So we did take the snatches out. That's actually when I started doing some more med ball throws and some loaded jumps, barbell jumps, trap bar jumps, just to get another simple way to be total body explosive. But I will do some kettlebell snatches. I will do some dumbbell snatches. just to get them to have to pay attention to an implement for that length of time where it's moving through space that far. I do love it. I wish we could snatch the team, but we have taken snatches out.
Yeah. All right. So you just touched on this. All right. So my next question was going to be, what are some things that you've noticed that your incoming freshmen are lacking in when compared to the rest of your football team? So overhead strength would be one of those.
Yep. Overhead strength, the amount of shoulder injuries they're coming in with, where it's they've had this torn or this sublux and this and that, is extremely high. And I'm not sure why. Everybody used to say it was because all they do is bench press, but I don't think that's all they do now. I mean, I don't imagine that that's all they're doing. But that's definitely a big one. If you get guys who are, and this may be a generational thing, the way you have to coach them is just a little bit different. They're not used to being not blamed, but they're not used to taking ownership necessarily of why something didn't go well. So you have to explain it to them in a different way of why it's not that you're bad or wrong. I'm not judging you. Just curl your wrist. You know what I mean? Like you have to coach. They take it more personal as they're getting younger. But the big guys who haven't done any conditioning at all is still an issue. They haven't done anything. That's one. Those would probably be the main two. And then the overall workload, if you have guys that are multi-sport athletes, they've never been in a training program where, I got to wake up every day and come do this for 8 weeks straight. I think that exposure is not there for the guys that are multi-sport athletes. And for the guys that even if they're single-sport athletes, if they don't have a high school strength coach, they're just not used to putting this time and that commitment to training itself. So I think they just have to get used to that and embrace that and accept that for those guys coming in. And they pick it up pretty quick. By their second year, guys are pretty much integrated.
Yeah. All right. How closely do you work with the football staff and make recommendations to them regarding practice, preparation, so that it aligns with what is taking place in the weight room? Is there any vertical alignment, as far as that goes, where, because one of and the reason I ask, because a lot of people talk to me or ask me about block periodization, and I think block periodization is, probably the best form of periodization especially for sports. But if the weight room is working with a form of block periodization, but the football program is not, then you run into issues. Is there any alignment between the two staffs for the organization of training?
There definitely is, and I think that's one of the biggest impacts we can make is if we can get that influence to rise. I've worked for a bunch of good coaches who value strength conditioning and value me, in my opinion. But even in those situations, I found that if they don't ask, they're not asking for a reason. They don't want your opinion all the time. When they want your opinion, they'll ask. So it's not always consistent where they're letting you do it. And in those cases, I think it's our job to make them right. So we have to kind of look at the practice schedule, and if we give our opinion and get vetoed, or if they didn't want our opinion on this matter, then it's like, all right, we have to alter something. I asked to not go 4 straight days during the beginning of camp. He said, no, we're doing it. So then that means, okay, I have to go back and change our plan. But definitely in the planning process, so if we're going into spring ball or into camp, I have been blessed to be in those meetings, and I do have some influence where coaches take some ideas, be it just I mentioned strength and powers, speed and agility, conditioning, and the sport in the offseason. In season, the things that stress them during practice are going to be high speed yardage, collisions, and then the volume, right? So those, I said, why don't we just look at it that way? We can look at each day and say the emphasis of that day is one of these 3 things. So at least we're getting some type of variety. And then a lot of times they confuse effort with intensity. So they think something's very difficult, or he was running hard, so that meant it was an intense run. I'm like, no, he was running hard, but he did it 10 times in a row. He's running really slow if you look at it.
Yeah.
If we want to actually get speed days, we need to have a little less tempo on those days, a little lower volume, and so forth. It could be something as simple as, all right, we're going to run open field one-on-ones on this day, but tomorrow let's take that down to the red zone, just as a way to automatically put a constraint on the drill. I know these receivers not running goals today. They ran a bunch of goals yesterday. They don't need to do it today. If we ran inside run yesterday, let's not do team run today. Let's do third and long today. And they've been receptive to those type of ideas. Not always exactly perfect, but they do. In camp, Coach Anderson here has a thing where he calls it a high volume day. Basically, it just means we're running a sprint after every series of plays. It does add some volume of running, but it's basically just sneaking in conditioning during practice.
Right.
So he's always open to, okay, let's make a hard day a hard day. Let's figure out what are the best days to do those high volume days. Those are the days that are our hardest days in the weight room. I'm not going to – if I meant for it to be a light day and we did that, it kind of defeats the purpose because now tomorrow I'm going to get it. So we're definitely in alignment with those things. We'll talk ahead of time, be it at least one day in advance. This year was great. We got to map out the entire camp of where those high days were going to fall, and then I was able to go through and make us right in the weight room.
Awesome. That's good. That's awesome that you have that relationship with the staff.
Huge.
So we're getting close to the end. There's, I was going to ask you if there's any technologies that you're using at Utah State. Do you have GPS? And
we're limited here just from a budget standpoint. When I first got here, they did have Catapult. The annual subscription is crazy, and we're in Logan, Utah. We're up in the mountains, so in the wintertime, we're inside a lot, and those devices were not reliable in our indoor. So we did let that go, way to feed that back into the budget. Let's get some recruiting. Let's get some meals for these kids and stuff like that.
Right.
But at other places, we've had a ton. We've had everything from Polar to Catapult to Zephyr, and managed a bunch of those things. We've had Tendo units. We've had GymAwares. So I've been exposed to a lot of those things. I think there's value in them. The velocity-based training is something that's very interesting. Just as a strength coach, we're learners. We like the science of training. So just from a nerding out in the weight room standpoint, I think they're good. Also, if you were ever in a setting, be it a pro setting where guys are in and off your team, and or you don't have necessarily much control over what they're going to put on the bar, I think it's a way to manage that. If you were in high school and you had a big room of kids and it's just one coach and you can't assign loads, and they're also 15, they might be adapting really, really fast.
Right.
I do think the VBT can help you in those settings also. As far as the GPS, the best thing that we did that I liked the most was keeping a ratio of internal loads to external loads. So internal load being heart rate, external loads being whatever your measure was, player load, high-speed yardage, total yard, whatever you were looking at. Find our key external load and our key internal load, and as long as they're both moving in the same direction, I know everything is fine. So if we had a Tuesday where the external load was really low, but everybody's internal load was really high, that shouldn't happen. So it's like, okay, either they went partying or were overtrained. Something bad was off that day. Because if it's hard, then it was just hard. As long as the internal load says their body thought it was difficult, and you look at what they did and it was difficult, I think we're fine. And as long as those things are moving in the same direction, that was kind of an easy way to trigger something's wrong if they don't move properly. And it's cool in the off season, you can see it. You do the same load, the same external load, and the internal load starts going down. Yeah. Oh, this required less work for me to do the same thing that we did 4 weeks ago. So it's cool in that sense. But definitely for us, the biggest red flag was that those two measures didn't move together.
Good. Now, last question, and you touched on this kind of in the beginning. When it comes to developing weight room culture and ownership in the strength and conditioning program, and what your expectations are for your staff and team, like how do you set that up so that you know that the goal of the program is being met on a daily basis?
Yeah, that's where we have to be consistent. We have to bring it. It starts with me, and then on to my staff. If I'm BSing or if I'm not coaching, then my staff's going to see that and think that that's okay. So establishing the things that we want our kids to be. They say behaviors and habits are caught more than taught. They want to see it. So for us, we chose to be strength coaches. Obviously, that means we like being in the weight room. We should act like we like being in the weight room. We should be fired up. We should be there early. We should be excited about what's going on. I think it kind of starts with that, us setting the tone for the room, and then the players come in and they match it. So if a kid comes in and doesn't look excited to be there, we immediately go in and talk to him. Might be jumping his ass. It might just be picking them up, dapping them up. Hey, what's going on? Boom, turn the music on. It may just be that. Whatever it is, let's get that established. Now, for us, I have a certain standard of professionalism for my staff as far as the way we communicate, our body language on the floor, certain things technique-wise. At the end of the day, our number one, all the smart stuff we've been talking about, we teach kids how to clean, squat, and bench. You know what I mean? So, like, that's the
Yeah.
We have to do that. We have to be able to coach. If anybody on my staff is uncomfortable coaching, there's a problem. So number one is, can you get that done? Can you make this lift look how it's supposed to lift with these 6 or 8 kids or how many kids you're coaching right now, and do that all the time, every single day? It's the 1 millionth time we've done this barbell warm-up. Are you letting them get away with BSing through it or not? So for us, right in the warm-up, if we're in the weight room doing a warm-up, I'm a little I'm okay with the little talk, and as long as the drill's being done properly. Right. If it's not, that's on my staff. I don't even get mad at the kid. That is, you're standing there, you're letting them not do it right. I see it from way over here, correct it. And as long as we do that, we're fine. With the players, the number one thing, I want them to have respect for the program, the preparation that we put in all year round, and respect for their teammates. If we have a morning run, there's 105 kids here, and one asshole's late, you are disrespecting the entire staff and all these 104 players. So that is unacceptable to me. We have to be here on time. We're here to work. Make sure your shoes are tied. Just show us that you're engaged, even if it's fake. All right, I want you here on time. Yeah, I want you looking like you're ready to go. And then other than that, is really don't be an energy vampire. You know, if there's sucking teeth, palms up, complaining, all that, we have to eliminate that ASAP. They might not all like training. That's fine. We can hopefully get them to like us and appreciate the value of training and what we do. A lot of what we do is fun. You know, they're competitors. They are guys who like showing off, and we do things where they get to show off what they can do. So hopefully over time they do get into it, but they have to respect their teammates, respect us as a staff, the prep we do, and then don't detract. Don't be an energy vampire. Other than that, we can coach up the rest of it.
Well, that's awesome, man. Well, great job. I could talk to you for 2 hours.
No doubt.
But, the bosses tell me to keep it. Whenever I turn in an episode that's extra long, they're like, holy mackerel. So unfortunately our time is up, man, but you did an incredible job. I knew this would be a great podcast, and maybe we can get together again and do some extra. But I appreciate your time, and it's been great talking to you. And not only talking about your career, but how you train the team at Utah State. And I've competed against you, so I know the level of preparation that it requires to beat a Paul Jackson team, man. I got on some planes, and honestly happy that you won the game. That's the toughest thing in coaching, is when you're competing against somebody that you know very well. Yeah. And but then really sick at my stomach because we got our butts kicked. So I respect you a great deal. I'm super proud of you. Please tell your entire family, your mom, your dad, your sisters, that I said hello. I follow the whole family on Facebook, so I'm always seeing everything that's going on. Please tell Christina hello. And tell them all from the entire Moffitt family, because we all love you guys and think a lot of you. So you can follow Coach Jackson on Twitter at capital COACH, capital P, capital JACKSON. So Coach Paul Jackson on Twitter and on Instagram. Again, capital C, P, and J, Coach Paul Jackson. Coach, have a great week. Really, really excited about this episode, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Yes, sir. It was fun. Thank you for everything.
All right. Well, have a good day. This brings us to the end of today's podcast. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you are someone interested in doing a podcast with us, or if you know someone that would be great to hear as a guest on our show, please email us at podcast at themoffittmethod.fit. Again, podcast at themoffittmethod.fit. I hope you enjoyed the show as much as I did. It's great. It's always great to see Coach Jackson. It's always great to talk to him. The guy is unbelievably bright and articulate and does a great job. For more information about the Moffitt Method program and everything that we have to offer, please visit our website at themoffittmethod.com.